Now that the Cardinals' winning streak has come to an end, we'll assess the team on where they stand and dive in deeper on the struggles for Nolan Arenado after the superstar made some interesting comments on Monday. Coming up on Be Schaeffer Daily. What's going on, everyone, and welcome in to this edition of Be Schaeffer Daily. Brenden Schaeffer here with you. It is the evening hours of Memorial Day, Monday, May 27th, 2024. Welcome back into the show after a bit of a hiatus this weekend. I was in northern Missouri at the family farm, was tracking the Cardinals-Cubs series from a distance. We did put up a video on game one of the two-game set. Didn't post yesterday. Apologies for that. But now we're going to dive back into some of what we missed and then recap Monday as the Cardinals traveled to Cincinnati. Pretty much a quick turnaround if you consider the rain delay that happened Sunday night and then the Cardinals having a 3:10 Central Time start time out in Cincy on Monday. Made for a quick turnaround. Cardinals maybe play a little bit sluggish in that game and they fall to the Reds, ending a winning streak that had continued against Chicago. Cardinals take 2 of 2 over the weekend as one of the games was rained out entirely. Will be made up on July 13th, as we talked about on the last Be Schaeffer Daily. But the Cardinals, well, where do they stand now? Because we have been in a bit of a topsy-turvy state when it comes to this team, based on the roller coaster nature of their season to this point. A lot of struggles early on for the Cardinals, but to be able to bounce back the way that they have in the last couple of weeks, they've still won 7 of their last 10 at this point, despite the loss on Monday. And they're within 2 games of a 500 record, 25-27, a game back of the Cubs for second in the NL Central, sitting ahead of the Pirates and the Reds by a game and 2 games, respectively, as we stand here on Monday night. So the Cardinals are back in the mix. There's no doubt about that. And Monday's loss does not change that. But how are we feeling about this Cardinals team, given, they've had a really nice run, but they're still below 500, and there's still some ground to be made up, certainly, when you're talking about the divisional race between, the Brewers and the Cubs and the Cardinals at this point. Really, anybody could conceivably win this division. The Reds now, they're riding red hot as they've won 4 in a row after beating the Cardinals on Monday afternoon. The final for that game, by the way, 3-1, as Lance Lynn pitched pretty well. Cardinals made a couple of costly errors, though, in the second inning as the Reds score some unearned runs, and the folks making the errors, not your standard fare when it comes to Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado defensively having an error in the same inning. How often do you see that? It ends up coming back to bite the Cardinals because this was the day that they turned back into a pumpkin offensively as the club was unable to get much of a push beyond the first inning home run by Goldschmidt. And that's one of the things that we talk about tonight because we didn't have the podcast after Sunday's game when Paul Goldschmidt went berserk, and he's continued it. And now suddenly you look up and his OPS for the season is 656, and that's not anything to write home about, but it's only 7 points lower than Nolan Arenado, who we had been sort of treating as, generally speaking, back to a pretty good form. The batting average was so high. His OPS wasn't very high because he hadn't been hitting for power, but you could kind of take the good with the bad. And suddenly, as we said could be the case, as we continued to talk about this Paul Goldschmidt season, there could come a week, there could come a point in time where he hits 3 home runs in back-to-back-to-back fashion, and next thing you know, you look up and his season-long numbers aren't as grave as they had first appeared. Well, he's hitting 222. His OPS is 656. Still a long way to go, but for him to be able to contribute the power numbers that he has over the last couple of days, I mean, we're talking about a 2-home-run game on Sunday and then the homer to kick things off for the Cardinals on Monday. Suddenly, he looks like a different hitter at the plate when he's been able to contribute those big-time power swings. How are we feeling about Paul Goldschmidt and his sudden resurgence? Is it something that can stick, and that when you look up at the end of the season, he's sitting with a 750 or a 770 OPS, and it's not really to his career norms, but nobody is particularly worried when talking about the things that might be most problematic with this Cardinals team in 2024. Goldschmidt would not necessarily be at the top of the list if he can continue to climb the ranks and improve. Now, a name that could be considered toward the top of the list if things don't improve for him in short order, which we've seen him come back and have some good moments not too far in the past, but right now he's going through it, and that's Nolan Arenado. We're talking about the Cardinals' third baseman who had some interesting comments that he made to John Denton of MLB.com. Saw JD's story for MLB.com tonight, and I want to get into it. We titled it that way Arenado's frustration grows. My swing is not good. That's the title from John Denton. And the quote of my swing is not good is something that Arenado said to JD multiple times after Monday's game. And we'll get into some of the quotes from Arenado and talk about what we think about it. Where do we think Arenado stands and what could be coming? Because when you have him struggling at the plate the way that he has, and it was an 0 for 4 today, drops the batting average down to 258. You have him defensively making miscues, and then even on an RBI hit in the inning, infield was drawn in, left side grounder by Benson. I think it was Benson that hit the one that I'm referring to. Arenado was maybe screened a little bit by the base runner Nick Martini on the play. He was going from second to third. It was a spot where there was runners on first and second. I just did not understand, though, the defensive positioning on this play with nobody out, runners on first and second. It was the 9-hole batter up, so maybe the Cardinals' left side of the infield was anticipating a bunt attempt, and Arenado was trying to stay true to that possibility. I understand left-handed batter up, you're going to shift to the right side as much as you're legally allowed to do so, and that seemed to be the way they wanted to position it. But I don't understand why Arenado is playing as close to the third base bag as he is, basically almost even with the baseline between second and third, instead of being backed up a little bit. I don't know. I've given up on trying to understand defensive positioning of Cardinals infielders over the course of time because it to me, it's been the one thing that I have consistently disagreed with Ollie Marmol managed teams about. I just see a number of times those little dribblers will find their way through a drawn-in infield. And this, again, was a shifted infield to where Arenado's the only, I know legally there's got to be somebody technically on the left side. The shortstop position has to not be crossed over the bag to the second base side or the first base side of second, rather. But Arenado is essentially the only guy that's going to make a play on a ground ball to the left side. And he was drawn in so far that he wasn't able to get to this one. And maybe it was one that he should have gotten to. The error was certainly one that was a play that should have been made. And then Paul Goldschmidt later in the inning ends up giving up just a very uncharacteristic ball that gets right by him and would have been another out to improve the Cardinals' standing. And they're unable to get that one. Goldschmidt, I don't know if he was thinking maybe to go home with the ball that was hit right to him at first base because there was a runner on third with one out. Whatever the case was, he lets it go right by, and the run certainly scores. So that's 2 unearned runs that go against Lance Lynn in an inning that he was snake bit by Arenado and Goldschmidt errors, 2 guys that have a ton of gold on their mantles, respectively. Ends up making a couple of bad errors there in the inning. And Lance Lynn still, to his credit, had a nice day. 6 innings, 3 runs, only one of them obviously earned, but either way, a quality start with the 3 runs allowed. 5 hits he gave up, walked 3. Those walk totals for Lance Lynn still a little bit higher than you'd like to see, but I think he kind of settles into, with this game, the type of outing that you kind of thought you'd get from Lance Lynn when the Cardinals signed him in the offseason. 92 pitches to get through 6 innings, even though there were a couple of instances, as we mentioned early, where he had to get more than 3 outs to get out of an inning. Ultimately, Lance Lynn did everything you could have hoped to see from him today, but offensively, the Cardinals were not in the same sort of zone that they had been in during this 5-game winning streak when they swept the Orioles and defeated the Cubs in 2. And I just don't, I'm not calling that a sweep, but certainly a nice weekend against Chicago where the Cardinals can avoid losing any games to their rivals at Busch Stadium. And boy, some exciting games it was there for the Cardinals at Busch. Want to get into some of that talk for sure before we get out of here today. So stick around if you'd like to hear some more happy talk about the Cubs series because it really was good. But now we're going to get into something a little bit more timely because, like I said, I didn't record Sunday, and so we'll backtrack at some point. But I think what's on the top of everybody's minds now, or what's going to be on Tuesday when folks check out the story by John Denton of MLB.com, Arenado's frustration grows. Quote, my swing is not good. Arenado basically falling on the sword and speaking up to what we've all kind of seen from him this year, which is that, well, he's not playing up to his normal capabilities and what Cardinals fans or baseball fans in general are used to seeing from him throughout his tremendous career. 33 years old, a career 864 OPS, 285 lifetime batting average with 328 homers and over 1,000 RBIs. But this year for Arenado, just 3 home runs, just a 258 average, and a 663 OPS with 23 driven in, which is about a pace. Cardinals at this point are 25-7 27, so that's 52 games. It's about a third of a season. Not quite, but within the next couple of days, you'll hit that mark. Arenado, 9 home runs, 10 home runs, 68, 70 RBIs. That does not feel like a Nolan Arenado stat line, but that's what he's on pace to do through almost a third of the calendar season in 2024. You just don't expect those types of numbers from Arenado, and it hasn't been any better of late. As I mentioned earlier in the show, there was a point in time this year where we were seeing some more consistency from Arenado and felt like he had maybe turned the corner, and along with Wilson Contreras was maybe one of two guys that you weren't worried about at one point in time in this Cardinal lineup. Now, for the most part, they took a step back today, but for the most part, this lineup has come around. We've used the phrase 1 through 9, or Ollie Marmol certainly has, and while I think you could nitpick on some certain spots that aren't going a full cylinder at this point, largely that's been the case. They've been able to sustain some pretty quality offense prior to Monday, where they just scored the 1 run on the Goldie bomb, 5 total hits and didn't walk. I mean, you're talking about a lean showing from a base runner perspective from the Cardinals on Monday. And this is one where, like, if you want my take on it, game didn't start until 8:40 on Sunday night, and because you had that 2.5-hour rain delay. Cardinals did everything in their power, and they won that series against the Cubs. They got game 2. It was down to the wire. We could talk a little bit about the Ryan Helsley stuff if you want. I was not, obviously, being out of town over the weekend in rural Missouri. I was mostly listening to the games rather than watching them against the Cubs. But it seems like people were talking about Ryan Helsley potentially tipping his fastball. And then if you look yesterday at the sequence of pitches thrown, he was not throwing the fastball hardly at all, which maybe tells you that maybe he thought he was tipping it or the catcher thought he was tipping it. And that if that's something in your mind, that's a hard thing to just come out and tell him, hey, you're tipping, just don't do it this way. You almost just have to maybe stay away from a pitch, and it's something that you can address not in the middle of a key save opportunity. I'm not sure exactly the way that went down, if he was tipping, wasn't tipping, because, again, I wasn't watching. I was radio only for that game on Sunday night out by the lake. But it certainly would stand to reason, looking at the pitches thrown and a lot of sliders and curveball and that sort of vibe to Ryan Helsley's outing, that maybe there was something going on, and he was getting hit a little bit in the game on Saturday as well. I think that was the day he gave up 4 hits in the run, but was able to get out of it. It didn't strike me particularly, and I was watching at that point, that he was giving up a ton of hard contact, but nevertheless, a little bit of an uncharacteristic weekend for Helsley. Ultimately, still getting both saves, though, so it kind of goes to show how spoiled Cardinals fans have been maybe from the dominance of Ryan Helsley this year. You expect him to go out there and have it be automatic, and, well, it wasn't automatic either time, but he was still able to close the deal, which is encouraging to see, and maybe can get on the other side of whatever he's going through a little bit right now with maybe a lack of confidence in the triple-digit heat. And if guys know it's coming, then you can understand where that would turn into a pitch that you're maybe a little bit more hesitant to throw in certain spots. But mechanically, if that's something that's going on, hopefully has a little bit of an opportunity now to address that, and we'll definitely be watching closely the next time that he's out there to see if there's any discernible difference between what people were maybe spotting from him over the weekend and what they're hoping to see from him very soon as the Cardinals look to get into that next save opportunity. But as we were talking about the Cardinal offense, explaining why maybe things were a bit of a lull on Monday, not too surprising when you think about that 8:40 start time and the travel schedule. I think the Cardinals didn't get into Cincinnati until the wee hours of the morning, whether it was 3 a.m., 4 a.m., whatever it was. And then you have a ball game to play about 12 hours later, maybe 11 hours later. Maybe you get to the hotel and it's more like 10 hours later. And how much sleep do you actually get? That's tough, man. I knew that schedule would be tough when I saw that 3:10 game, and that was before I even realized there could be rain in the forecast for Sunday night, and there sure was. I know Cardinals fans had some thoughts about that. Like, they went ahead and canceled Friday's game with plenty of notice, still an opportunity to potentially play that game later on at night. And with a Saturday night game, they could have tried to play later into Friday, but they didn't do so. They banged it relatively early. I knew that they would. I didn't talk much about this over the weekend when I put up the lone B Schaeffer Daily from the weekend that I put out there, but regarding Friday night's game, man, I thought for sure that they made a mistake with the way that they approached that. I thought, look, just start the game and see how far you get. And they probably could have got through 4 innings, maybe 5. And then you could make a decision as to how to proceed after the rain. But the rain was heavy when it came, but it didn't last all night there on Friday. But I get it. They didn't want to necessarily be in some uncomfortable circumstances for the players, having to wait around. First game of a series, tire you out that way. But knowing that they were playing at night on Saturday, you figured they probably could have gotten that game in certainly before midnight on Friday, and then slept in on Saturday and got to the ballpark at a reasonable time for a 6 p.m. first pitch. They didn't do that. They banged the first game to July 13th, which I guess was a reason that they were hesitant to bang the one from Sunday. Now, I wasn't in St. Louis on Sunday. As I mentioned, I was in northern Missouri. Very different weather there because we were getting tornadoes at times on Sunday night in St. Louis, I know. But out there, up in Honeywell, Missouri area, there was virtually not. It was beautiful on Sunday until late at night when there was some rain and some thunderstorms. But let me know, was there a window to play this game on Sunday if it would have been a Bally Sports Midwest game starting at 1:15 first pitch? Because I think the ESPN thing kind of screwed them. That was my thought. Now, if your comments will let me know. If it was bad weather all day in St. Louis, then so be it. But I kind of thought that it was more of a afternoon, evening slant to the weather, which means if that's the case, they probably would have gotten that game in just fine if it weren't the Sunday night game of the week. So ultimately they got it in, but I think my point with all of this is that it cost the Cardinals come Monday because you figured they could come out a little bit sluggish. Now, Lance Lynn, to his credit, was not, but I think the starting pitcher the day before that knows as he's flying on the plane, he's doing his routine, he knows he's got a game to pitch the next day, and it's going to be up to him to kind of carry the load for the team, and he did a really nice job of that. If not for the errors in the second inning, Lance Lynn could have walked away a winner potentially today, allowing just the one run. But the part that still would have made that difficult is the knowledge that the Cardinal offense was pretty sluggish outside of a Goldschmidt home run. Just had 4 hits, no walks outside of that homer. Nick Lodolo was very good for the Reds. Good numbers for Goldie against him for his career, which was good to see continue today. And now Goldie's up to 7 home runs. So and we're going to get into the Arenado stuff. That's going to be the main focus that we talk about the rest of the way here. Goldie's got 7 homers. He's on pace for 21-22. Arenado's still on pace for 9 or 10. Like, that's the differential now as Goldie heats up a couple of days where he knocks 3 balls out of the ballpark. Suddenly, it's a pretty big differential between what we expect power-wise from Goldie versus what we see Arenado doing. And Arenado's power struggles go back to last August. We've said since August 19th of last year, it's just been 3 home runs because he went that distance the rest of the season and did end the couple weeks at the end of last year on the IL, but had a good long stretch where he didn't homer, and then this year had a good long stretch to begin the year, and still right now sitting on 3. So the power concern for Arenado is one thing, but now, he's going on a little bit of a spell where I said earlier it hasn't gotten any better of late for Arenado. Last 7 games hitting 148 with a 148 on base and a 185 slug. He's 4 for his last 27 over that 7-game span with no homers and 1 RBI, 5 strikeouts. Over his last 15 games, if you extended it out, because that's like a 330 a 330 OPS over the last 7 games. Over the last 15 games, and at that point you're talking about more than half a month, he's hitting 194 with a 206 on base and a 274 slug over the last 15 games, which is, like 30% of the season to this point has been the last 15 because they played 52 games. Do a little bit of math there. Something in that neighborhood. And man, is he struggling or what? That's an OPS, not below 600, but it's below 500 for the last 15 games. 206 on base, 274 slug. That's a 480 OPS. And over the past 30 games, 294 on base, 316 slug. That's just barely above a 600 OPS for the last 30 games. 114 at-bat span for Nolan Arenado. So what's going on with Arenado is the question of the day, and, well, he tried to answer that very question as he was asked by reporters, and this is the story from John Denton of MLB.com. I want to read some of the quotes that he put in this story because it's a frustrated player that is basically speaking pretty plainly as to the way his season is going. Quote, It's bad. The swing is not good. My swing is not good, Arenado said. I've been working on it and trying to figure this thing out, but my swing is not good. That's Nolan Arenado after an 0 for 4, in which he also made an error in the game. Highest paid player on the Cardinals, right? I mean, we know the contract. And for the most part in his career, man, he's lived up to every dollar that he's made. Right now for the Cardinals, he's still batting in the middle of the order. Ollie Marmol moves him down a little bit today. I'll say Ollie Marmol, man, he went for the jugular, I think, with this lineup today. A lot of speculation, what kind of lineup we're going to see after that tough travel day. Mason Wynn, he's at short leading off. Had a base hit. Burleson in the 2-hole. Goldie, Herrera, and then Arenado, they moved down one spot. Gorman was in there. Pages was in there, which I think Pages probably your best option in this series for as many games as you want to start him because of the Elly De La Cruz factor. Reds run a ton. It's not just Elly. They run a ton, and Herrera is just not as effective as holding the running game together as Pages. So we didn't see any Elly De La Cruz stolen bases today, but certainly I think over the course of this series, you're going to see him, if he gets on base in a situation to steal. I think the one time he was on today, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he just had a chance to, or he was on twice. He walked twice, but I know one of the times he had a runner on in front of him, so didn't find a chance to steal. And Pages was able to throw out one attempted base stealer in Benson. So we'll see what the Reds look to do, but I like that call by Ollie. I would say you stick with that. You'd stick with Pages behind the plate. I just don't think, with the reputation the Reds have for running, that Herrera makes as much sense. You can DH him if you want him in the lineup, but I think this will be a series to give Pages a look. But every Cardinal that batted today struck out at least once. 12 Ks by the team. I thought they put together a lineup that had a chance. But, man, with the way that the travel went, the Reds didn't have to go anywhere. They were already in town, middle of the homestand. That's just all there was to it. I just didn't think you'd see a very productive lineup today from the Cardinals, and you didn't. And it is what it is. We'll see if it continues on Tuesday after the Cardinals get a good night rest. Because they played in the afternoon, so if they're being smart about it, they're catching up on Monday night into Tuesday, and then they'll play a night game on Tuesday, which should put them in a little bit of a better situation. But we'll see if the offense ends up looking similar to what it did, or if they can kind of get back to what we have been expecting of them the last couple of weeks, which has been really, really productive. And then if that ends up being what they do, you can chalk up Monday as a one-off because of the travel arrangements and the problems there. But for Arenado, there's no one-off. There's no chalking it up. It's just been rough. And we'll continue reading from his quotes from the John Denton story. And this is an element that I think people have wondered about, and I have talked about it myself, just kind of wondering aloud. Arenado, we seem to be hearing a lot of talk about him hitting to all fields and how that's like a good thing. And I fundamentally sort of disagreed with that and said, look, for any hitter, the numbers bear it out that the most successful batted ball is a pulled fly ball, a pulled hit in the air to your pull side. That's the most productive batted ball that you can have over the course of. If you just repeat it every time, fly balls are going to be hit with some authority. Obviously, you'd like to hit it on a line, but pulled fly balls are the ones that turn into home runs. They turn into damage. And the Cardinals have not been good at pulling fly balls. I mean, they weren't good at much of anything prior to the last couple of weeks, but that was one of the big things that folks were talking about is they weren't pulling their fly balls. And then we see Arenado in different quotes about how, well, he's getting going now because he's hitting the ball the other way, and how that's almost like counterintuitive to what you would think Arenado's prime swing should be. Shouldn't be hitting it to all fields. It should be pulling the ball in the air. So why is he trying to do something different than that? Well, we speculated that, look, just because he's not pulling the ball in the air doesn't mean he's not doing it because he's not trying to do it. But when you're lost with your swing, sometimes just on the path toward finding it back, you may hit it the opposite way, and you may stay behind the ball and drive it either up the middle or drive it to right field, and have that be a sign of, okay, I'm starting to find my timing back. And maybe that's what was going on with Nolan Arenado. And certainly with this quote, that seems to be the case. He says, quote, I'm a guy that pulls the ball in the air, and I haven't done that all year. I don't know what the answers are. I've got to continue to try and find it. I can see the difference of when I was good and when I'm not, but trying to apply it in games right now is really hard for me. End quote. That's Cardinals third baseman Nolan Arenado. So he says he recognizes, I'm a guy that pulls the ball in the air and I'm not doing it, is basically what he's saying. So it's not, you could put that to bed. We can put that to bed of Arenado is focusing too much on going the other way instead of leaning into the things that have made him great his entire career. It's a factor of he is off at the plate right now. And so when you do see something like a hit the other way, it's something that maybe you can cling a little bit of hope to that and say, hey, maybe he's about to turn the corner because he's starting to find his timing back or his rhythm back. But it's not necessarily an indicator that that's what he's trying to do. He recognizes that pulling the ball in the air is what has made him, that's his bread and butter. That's what's made him a superstar player, a generational type of third baseman with what he does offensively and what he typically does defensively. But right now, it's not going for him. Here's another quote from Arenado from John Denton's story, which you can read at MLB.com. Quote, I think it's a mixture of mechanics, but mentally, it's been frustrating. I mean, I've gone through struggles, but I'm still able to hit the ball in the air. But what I'm going through now is something that I've never gone quite like this. But my at-bats have been just terrible. I haven't felt like me all year. It's been a while. I don't think it's gone. I still move fast, and I've gone through all the numbers. And the numbers, they still tell me I'm moving fast as I ever have. But there's a mechanical issue, an approach thing. I haven't been me in the last 5 months of baseball. In 5 months of baseball, if we want to backtrack the calendar, you're talking about May of this year, April of last year. I don't know that he's counting spring training there, but you talk September, August of last year, maybe a little bit of spring mixed in there. So basically, second half of last year, largely, or like the last third of last year, and then coupling that into what's going on right now on the field. And last year, the tail end of his season before he went on the injured list to end the year and was dealing with back issues then, which I think it was just the timing of when he went on the injured list is why he didn't come back. There just wasn't time left to worry about it. But that kind of tanked his season, 774 the OPS. There was a time where he was sitting pretty in the 800s, just like he always tends to, but tailed off toward the end. And now we've seen a continuation of that, and it's almost been even more of a stark disappointment when it comes to the power outage and the overall numbers just being down. On-base percentage is .315 this year. That's exactly what it was last year. Same exact on-base percentage. Batting average, he's hitting, and I guess I should correct myself because I'm looking at Baseball Reference with that. So if I can find the updated numbers on MLB.com, because Baseball Reference, for just a hat tip, does not update the numbers until like overnight sometimes. So that's where I think that one could be wrong. On-base percentage is now down to .309, but before today it was .315, which is exactly what his on-base was in 2023. Batting average down to .258. Last year it was .266. Before today it was .263. So what I'm getting at is if you take away today's numbers, they just happened, he's got almost an identical average and an identical on-base to what he did in 2023. The stark difference is the slug. It's almost 100 points lower, and now after today it is at least 100 points lower. He slugged .459 last year for the full season. This isn't taking a small sample or anything. Those are his numbers. And this year he's slugging .354, 105 points lower. Just a massive, massive gap. And last year's slugging percentage was not even close to his career norms. .522 is his career slug. He's 170 points almost lower than his career norm, his career average slugging percentage. Can't hit the ball in the air. And he said, look, I've gone through struggles like this before, but even then I was still at least able to hit the ball in the air. This is different. And I think he diagnoses it as mechanical, but also it's got to be mental too. We know how much of the game is mental. And when you're diving in so much on the mechanics, and we know how Arenado is, how he operates, you know he's diving in on the mechanics. Like, it's inevitable that he is feverishly trying to fix this thing. But man, we're in that frustration, and now we're starting to see it a little bit leak into the field too. It's happened enough times this year where we go, wow, uncharacteristic error by Arenado, but then you go, well, wait a minute. I guess he's had a few of those now, right? 4 errors for Arenado so far this season. Today was the 4th. And I will try to make an effort to check out what that looks like in comparison to his career norms. Nothing too crazy dissimilar. Last year, he had 9 errors. So right now, they're close to being that third of the way through the season. And he's got 4. So that's on pace for about 12. So maybe not entirely fair to say he's carrying some of it into the field with him. But there have been some plays that weren't errors that I think you can make a case he could be up to 5 or 6 errors on the season instead of 4. There was the one just last week where he had 2 plays in a row that you would deem misplays, and only one of them was ruled an error. But largely, it's not the defense. You're still seeing him make the marvelous plays. Sometimes it's just like you don't want to describe Arenado as lackadaisical because he's the mortal opposite of that. But there's sometimes in the field where it just hasn't looked maybe quite like you are accustomed to seeing. It's few and far between still. I don't want to make too mountain out of a molehill here, but there's been a little bit of that, but certainly at the plate. And, he says, look, the at-bats aren't good. My swing is not good. So he is basically owning every little bit of that, and we're going to have to see what ends up happening as he moves forward. A little bit more from Arenado. I'm a guy who flirts with the swing too much, and I've always been that way, but I also know what I'm doing now is not good. So I don't want to just sit there and not do work, not try to change it, he's saying. I always watch old video of myself and mimic the good moves, but sometimes when you create bad habits, they're hard to break, and this one is taking a long time. So it's crazy, man. You go read the rest of John Denton's story because I don't want to, just give you everything that he writes in there, but talks a lot about he pulled 87 of his 90 home runs into left from 2021 to 2023. And obviously this year, we're talking about the fact that he's not pulling fly balls. That's going to be exactly why the power outage comes into play. He's always pulled his homers. Remember when what's his damn name? Andrew Kisner. I was trying to say Kittredge. When Andrew Kisner was on the team and he hit the backside homer, and it was like everything was about the backside home run. Like Arenado was almost like a little jealous that, man, Kisner got a backside homer. I really want to be able to do that. And I maybe thought too much into that. He knows where his bread is buttered. It's on pulled homers. But it was almost like it was a thing because the backup catcher was hitting a homer to the opposite field, and it's something that Arenado just had never done. But he didn't need to. He's going to become a Hall of Famer on the track that he was on before this year by pulling the crap out of the ball and doing it consistently and doing it 30 times a year into the seats. Right now, he's not pulling it. He knows it, and that's the problem. It's not like he's being stubborn, not like he's not trying to fix things. Like you said, he almost tweaks too much with his swing, and he knows that, but that's just part of what makes him tick. But when you're going through something like this, the last thing you want to do as Nolan Arenado is stop tweaking. You don't want to just stand still and say you're good where you're at because he's well aware that what he's doing isn't working. But man, you could kind of get yourself into the depths of the spiral almost to not be able to, you know what you're doing is wrong, so you want to try to change everything at once, and it can be hard to pinpoint where it's coming from, where the struggles are coming from. But what is your interpretation of Nolan Arenado right now with the numbers that he is having? I mean, we're talking about career lows across the board in a power productive standpoint for Nolan Arenado. Again, on base he's basically, he's not the career norms, but he's doing what he did last year on base wise. He's pretty much in line with what he's done as a Cardinal even. 327 career Cardinal on base, and he's at he was at 315 before today, 309. But if you look at his seasons as a Cardinal, 2021 he was 312. Last year he was 315. Now he's 309. The outlier was the MVP candidate season where he finished third behind Goldie, who won it that year in 2022. He had a 358 on base, was basically, I would imagine, taking more walks that year. Yeah, that was his most walks as a Cardinal, was that 2022 season. And, he just has the most hits as a Cardinal, most doubles as a Cardinal, just was fantastic in 2022. And that was the one year he got on base at a higher clip. The slug was an outlier season there as well compared to the rest of his St. Louis numbers. He obviously had some big slugging years in Coors Field and with Colorado. But Arenado, it's all about the power at this point. And look, if that's going to be the hitter that he is, if he's going to be a 260 hitter, but without much pop, can't keep batting cleanup because he's doing the opposite of cleaning up right now. And Ollie Marmol did move him down to 5 today. Here's a quote from JD's article where he basically had said he was trying to give Arenado a breather by dropping him to 5th in the order. So a breather doesn't seem to indicate that that's permanent, but it probably should be for now. It may be even lower than 5th because that's still an RBI producing spot. Arenado's probably going to bat 6th or 7th or so, in my opinion. I know we were saying that about Goldie just a few days ago, but things can change. But you might be leaving too many opportunities on the table right now if Arenado is not feeling himself. But what does a manager do? Like we've seen the way that Ollie Marmol likes to manage through these things. He likes to breathe life into his players and not look for the first opportunity to snuff them out. And then maybe a guy spirals even more because he's realizing, yep, I'm not that dude anymore. I'm a 7-hole hitter now, and that's maybe the way that I'm mentally going to approach the game. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy for some people. So I don't think that Ollie Marmol is looking to just nuke Arenado into the bottom half of the order permanently, but I would make the case that right now there are moments, like how many times did Goldschmidt come up when he wasn't swinging it well, where you look back and go, oh, man, that could have been an opportunity to maybe do something differently. If he didn't have Goldie batting 3rd in those moments, he was batting lower, maybe somebody who was feeling themselves a little better would have come up in the RBI spot and come through. So Cardinals kind of going through that with Arenado a little bit here. The quote that JD put into the story, quote, in hitting in the middle of the lineup there, the number 3 or number 4 as he has, we've had conversations, and I felt like getting Herrera up there today made sense. And John wrote, said Marmol, who was clearly choosing his words carefully. Yeah, it's a touchy subject. I think with certain guys it is. With a Goldschmidt, it might not be as much. Goldschmidt has said a lot of times he doesn't care where he hits. It just doesn't matter to him. If you batted Paul Goldschmidt 9th, I legitimately don't think it would make any difference to him. Call me crazy. Let me know if you think I'm wrong. Arenado is more of a routine guy, more of a, is there a little bit of a rightfully so, an ego element to that where it's like, I'm the team's cleanup hitter. That's what I've done my whole career, and that's what's made me great. I need to be that guy. But if you're not feeling yourself at the plate, is it incumbent upon the manager to try to massage that and say, hey, look, we know you're still that guy. We'll reinforce it by keeping you in your spot. Or do you make a move? You move a guy down, but you also risk, losing that guy a little bit. Or like I said, turning it into a self-fulfilling prophecy of a guy has certain expectations of himself as the cleanup hitter. But now if he's a 7-hole hitter, what does that do to the psyche of the player? Like a lot of different little ways you could look at that. But let me know, Cardinals fans, how you viewing the struggles right now by Nolan Arenado. Largely, if we had done the podcast Sunday, would have been just exceptionally positive in the way that we would have talked about the team. Today ended up being more about the stuff that happened Monday and the very interesting quotes by Arenado. The team goes 0 for 1 with risk because they just didn't get anybody in scoring position. Only 4 left on base for the game. Goldie's homer and then 4 more hits. That's it. That's all they ended up with, and all of them were stranded. Lance Lynn pitched well. Matthew Liberatore pitched in relief. Something we had talked about over the weekend was Andre Palante potentially coming. Well, he's here now and seems like he'll be the 5th starter unless he's just given some extra lift to that bullpen, and then they'll call somebody else up from Memphis if they're going to play the shuttle game. But Libby, he pitched in relief, which tells me he should not be an option to start the next time that they need one. Kyle Leahy was good again in relief as well for the Cardinals. But that's really kind of the tenor of things right now is, look, Cardinals are 2 games below 500. They're back in the mix. Certainly, today's game, Monday's game, does not change that. But how do you feel about the way things are going for the Cardinals, who still have not named a starter for Wednesday as of this recording on Monday night? Arenado, he's frustrated. Cardinals, I think, less frustrated in general with the way they're playing right now. Let's see if Monday is one they can just chalk up to the not getting very much rest, to the rigorous travel conditions, and see what Kyle Gibson does on Tuesday against Andrew Abbott as the Cardinals look to take one from the Reds and avoid letting the Reds back into this race, because 4 wins in a row for Cincy is putting them in a much better position than they had been. So that's going to do it, though, for this edition of the show. Appreciate you guys for sticking with me, for being patient over the weekend when I was not as productive. Talking about Arenado being productive. My YouTube channel was not as productive, nor was the Spotify podcast, but that's been a rarity this year. So if you like daily Cardinals content for the most part, hit that subscribe button on the lower right-hand corner of your video screen for Cardinals content all season long. And make sure you check out the memberships, too. That is in the description. Link is in the description to this video if you want to become a channel member. I think we've got 15 of them now. So you can become number 16. Ray Langford or Reggie Sanders, if you're so inclined. That's going to do it for this edition of the show. Thank you guys so much, and we'll talk to you next time on Be Safe Daily. Peace.